Oh, there's a countdown.
So I've just got to share this to the main group. So we are live. If you are watching, please just give us a second to get this set up. Hi guys, thanks for joining us this evening. I'm just give me a second to get this to the main club page so that anyone who is not on the events page is able to go. Just give me a second. We are having issues, so if you guys can just give us a second, and we'll need you to kind of update us a little bit on how the connection is coming across to you, whether you can hear everything, see everything.
We've got someone say good evening from Facebook, so I think they can see us.
Perfect. Nearly there.
And Paul's joined and he says good morning from Australia.
Hi, Paul, nice to see you here. I learned as well that we can do this, which I think is really cool. This hopefully should work.
Yeah, I can see it. That's good.
There we go. Okay, I think we'll get going. This should have all posted okay. If you are watching via the book club and not the events page, if you're wanting to interact live and be part of the discussion, then you'll have to click on the video, which will then take you to the events page. So just make sure that you are on the events page if you want to interact live with us this evening. So this is our first live session, which we've been really excited about. I hope everything works okay. Like I said, we have had some connection problems, but hopefully that'll all kind of iron out. If there are connection issues that are really severely affecting the session, then please do let us know. We can obviously see all of your comments, so just keep us updated with that. But for now, we'll get going and see how things go. So yeah, welcome to the 6th instalment of the Jackson Insight Group study, where we provide summaries and reviews of Michael Jackson related literature. As I've said, this is our first ever live session, which we've been really excited about. Normally we pre-record on, for example, a Friday evening, and then we broadcast via watch party on a Sunday evening. So it's really nice that we get to kind of do the recording and the live interaction all together at the same time. So yeah, we would love as much participation as possible this evening. So feel free to post your comments, which we're able to see and share. If you have any questions, obviously Paul has joined us, which is absolutely amazing. So if you have any maybe questions for him that he'd be happy to answer, then now's a good chance to do that. As I've said, if you do want to interact live, please make sure that you are watching via the events page. If you're on the book club, just make sure that you click the video, which will then bring you into the events page. So I'm sure you'll know this by now, but this is the wonderful book that we have been studying and looking at this month, which is Humanitarian by Paul Dwyer. Some of us had already read this, some of us hadn't. Some of us had seen the documentary but not read the book. Some of us had read the book but not seen the documentary. So we were really looking forward to this one. We know that the group had previously done an author interview with Paul, which was really fascinating. So we know that this had kind of been on the radar within the group for a little while, and there'd been lots of discussions about it. So we were really keen to read it ourselves and to sort of really look at the documentary and really kind of start to study it, which is what we aim to do. And we've also heard some really exciting news that Taj has, I believe, interviewed Paul for part of Taj's very much anticipated documentary that we're all waiting so eagerly for. So, I mean, that is just congratulations to Paul, because what an honour for Paul, and I think what an honour for Taj to be able to have people like Paul who are working so hard to keep Michael's legacy going. And I did hear, I think it was Paul that mentioned this, that when he was doing the interview with Taj actually had a copy of Paul's book on his desk. So I think, you know, anyone who's writing about Michael, I don't think there's a better gift really that you could ask for, you know, to have a member of the Jackson family own your book and obviously feel so positively about it that they want to invite the author to be a part of such a big project. So yeah, fantastic, Paul, well done. Okay, so let's move on to the book itself. Now we're going to be reading from slightly different versions. In case you didn't know, there are two versions to the book. Some of us have the original version, some of us have the revised version. Angie, I know that you've got both, so would you mind explaining a little bit about the main differences between the two?
Yeah, so I've got two copies here. So I had originally obviously read the original version, and it wasn't until you girls started talking that I realised there wasn't updated and I hadn't got it, because there were some things that were a bit different. So obviously one noticeably more on the cover. So we've got, sorry, this is reversing it. So here we've got an award on the revised one, and he's put revised version. And there's now sort of a title down the spine of it, but there wasn't previously. I think in the newer version, there's a few additions along the way. I mean, Paul actually starts more with his introduction from the author, whereas previously it had straight into sort of the introduction, which is still in there, but it just changed the order. There are some new sort of stories. So there's one here. This is in the new version. It wasn't previously. There were quite a few like this. This one, for example, as well. That's a new one to it. Sorry, I'm getting used to the camera because it's the other way around for us now. And that one, that's a new story in there. Also this one here, you can see all my little notes everywhere. So this is also, notice we've got quite a few detail. I saw in the old one, I mean, Paul's still got a photo of Shmuley in here. I don't know whether it was actually done from the original, but one of the photos, he's now been cropped out of it, which I don't know if that was on purpose for Paul or just fitting it into the text. And then, for example, there's a newspaper article, camera, doing it that way around. There we go. That wasn't in the previous one. And then at the end, Paul's added in, a lot more of the humanitarian things that his children have gone on to do. There's also now the whole entire Oxford speech, which I think I'm speaking to in a bit because I was lucky enough to be there for it. And then at the end now, Paul's added a number of sort of comments and quotes from people, which is great. So there's a lot of similarity there, but in the new version there is some additional. The only one that I noticed, and Paul might correct me, I might be wrong, was I think the only one that was sort of removed was the story about the Sammy Davis Jr. Song. in there. That's the only one that I sort of noticed removed, and there was just a few. This was the original photo with Shmooly in there, which has now been cropped. So obviously, if you're owning the new version, you've got more content in there. That's it on that part.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, some of us might be, when we're referencing page numbers and stuff, we might be coming from slightly different versions, but we'll try to make sure that we kind of make you aware of which book it's coming from before we give the page number, just so not to confuse you too much. So one of the book's opening lines is, in the year 2000, Michael Jackson was listed into the Guinness Book of World Records for breaking the world record for the most charities supported by a pop star, an achievement that was accomplished by a lifetime of tireless dedication, yet a little known fact that has been overshadowed by years of fiction. And Nicole, I think this really summarises the context and objective of the book, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The book is obviously all about Michael's humanitarian efforts, and it sort of sets it up right at the beginning with talking about that award. And for those people that haven't seen the book, it's almost set out in a journal type way. It's chronicles all of his humanitarian efforts, so hospital visits, charity visits, all his appearances, and I quite love the way that it's laid out in that way, because what it does is just shows the sheer volume of work that Michael did in that regard. And you sort of, as you flick through, even just at a glance, you start to see just how, what we all know as fans, but anybody else that was looking, or even fans that didn't realize the extent, I think we're all sort of blown away by the extent of the work that he did. And I think, well, to me, it kind of just emphasizes his dedication to helping people, helping children, helping the earth, those sorts of things. Even to the point, I loved that Paul has even put right at the very beginning a definition of humanitarian. It's the very first thing you open to. It really sort of, that and the quote you just read, Emma, really sets it up for what the book is all about.
I really like as well how it's in chronological order, because I think when you read those first couple of introductions that Michael had to the humanitarian work as a child, I think that really sets up the rest of his life, and you can really see the starting point, and then how over time it sort of evolved into a much bigger thing for him. And sort of by the time he particularly got to sort of the 80s and 90s, he was very, very involved. And I think it's quite important to have chronology to kind of see the process. So I think that's great. And obviously one of the fantastic things about the book is that almost with every story there's a picture to correspond with that story. And of course, to go even further, if you've seen the documentary, not only do you get the still images, but you actually get the video footage. You see Michael delivering, the speeches, and you see him the awards, and you see him going into these children's hospitals and stuff. So I think the documentary is a fantastic addition, I think, to the book. And I think both of them together are really a fantastic coupling. So on page 7, it starts with Michael in the 70s, and I know that this is a story that we've heard in Jermaine's book as well. That sort of any money that Michael earned from his gigs as a child, he would spend in sweets for the kids in the neighbourhood, and so that was kind of the start, I guess, of his journey. He then visits a children's hospital in 71, something that impacts him greatly, to the point that he starts to spend any free time that he has in between shows, in between his schoolwork, writing letters to children his age in hospitals. And so straight away you get that sense that he's never done this humanitarian work out of pressure, out of being asked to, because he felt he should, for his image, you know, something that his parents encouraged him to. This really is something that kind of came from within, and that's really clear from an early age that he felt that kind of desire within him to do that. And he showed lots of, one of the things that I really picked up on in the book is actually how humble he was. Despite becoming this great star, I've never forgot who he was, what his roots were, the difficulties that not just people, his own community were suffering with, but, you know, he's very aware of what the world was suffering with, and he really wanted to stay humble and to use his kind of, to have positive influence. Even like on page when I think of being a dad, and there's a quote I highlighted because it really resonated, and he said, "I want to see people in the slums, those who cannot pay to see us." And that's a really running theme throughout the whole book, that he just had this sense of, you know, if people can't come to the shows, if children can't come to the shows, we're going to get them to the shows. If they can't afford to come to the shows, we're going to pay. If they can't come to the shows, I'm going to go to them, I'm going to see them. You know? And we all know how humble Michael was, but I think this book really epitomizes that and really emphasizes that.
Yeah, I found a little video in the last month as well that kind of emphasizes, and that's another little story actually from Catherine that emphasizes just how young Michael was when he started kind of wanting to do something to help others. And I'm just posting it to the comments if anybody wants to look. It's towards the end, and she was telling a story of when he was really young and he saw the little kids in Africa. They had their little big bellies and they were very skinny, and he was asking what was happening, what was wrong with them. And she explained it, and then his reaction was to say, when I grow up, I'm going to do something to help them. So to have that sort of kindness and empathy at such a young age, you can see just how early it all started.
Yeah, there was, sorry, there might be a bit of a delay in between us speaking because of the connection problems. We're not quite sure it's finished, so we're having to wait a couple of seconds just to make sure the person's finished before the next person speaks. But yeah, I mean, there's just, when we're talking about Michael staying humble and remembering who he was, and there's so many examples of Michael doing things, privileged to be able to enjoy his concert. So for example, on page 16, again, this was a story where I just thought this is such a Michael thing to do. You know, there were lots of people around Michael, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, his own family as well. They wanted to fix, you know, some sort of scheme or some arrangement to earn an extra, I think, $10 to $12 million in interest. So the way that they were going to sell the tickets to, I believe it was it the Victory concert, or was it I think it was the Victory concert. You know, there was this big scheme to kind of make all this extra money off interest, and Michael said, no, I don't want to exploit people, I don't want to kind of get more money than we have to. And so he ensured that there was administration, I guess, that the tickets were sold in a fair way at a fair price via Ticketmaster. And again, a lot of, I don't know many artists who would have done that. It's all kind of, well, let's make as much money as we can. And so it's even things like that. It's not always about what he, you know, it's always about the visits to the orphanages, the victims hospital, the donating of money. I mean, obviously we're going to talk a lot about that, but it's those other things that people need to be aware of. The fact that he didn't want to rip people off. He had the opportunity to do that. He was being encouraged to do that, and actually he always tried to stand up for what was right. That's not fair. I love my fans. The fans deserve to be treated fairly, and you know, I just feel like in every possible situation, every possible given scenario, he always tried to do what was right by other people. That is what a humanitarian does.
I think Shari's saying more about this on the comments, and yeah, it was a lottery system for the Victory Tour that he didn't agree with. And I think also the author of the Einstein, Michael Jackson and Me book also spoke about that. He was sort of involved in that sort of publicity afterwards to try and help Michael and the Jacksons with that. But yeah, absolutely, he made a statement to say that all the proceeds he was getting were going to charity.
So what I like about this book too, I want to mention this.
Which it did, didn't it?
Okay.
I think you're okay to go ahead, Daniela. I think it's just a delay with Emma's feed, possibly.
Yeah. Okay, it stays so clearly factual, you know. That's what I noticed. There is a date, there is a story, and there is a picture to prove it. So even somebody from outside, you know, he said, oh, Michael Jackson, they make it up, and whoever. No, it's clearly there's the date, the story, and the picture to it, and it's just so plain. You know? There's not a lot of lighting. It stays with the facts. No opinions, no nothing, and I liked that. Yeah,
and I think Paul said that in his author interview, that he always went to corroborate everything that was in there, so it wasn't just sort of hearsay as such. So he did all that research to ensure they were factual. And as you say, I think the way it's almost like a reference book, which is great. And yeah, Paul hasn't put all his opinions on every scenario. It is very factual. You know, each story is sort of brief because it is just literally giving you the facts and the facts that are known. It's a really good one for legacy because it can't really be disputed. I think I don't know if it's okay to sort of bring this up now. I know there's a bit of a delay there with Emma, but I was just going to say, from those of us that have been around for a few years, I mean, as we know, much of the humanitarian work that Michael did, you didn't really get to read about in the press. But the one way we did was all sort of Jackson fanzines. And there's some of them here that you can see. I mean, he got the Point of Light award. So it's noted in these sort of magazines like Off the Wall. There was Jackson's Collectors Club, D5 for doing Jackson Action, Lee Simpson, who used to do Michael Mania. So all of those would sort of chronicle bits of his humanitarian work. So that's kind of how, when I was younger, I used to learn about what he did, and, you know, would be so impressed. I'm just going to show a couple more that you can see possibly on here. So sort of different ones, but that's the difference. You know, in the fan magazines you'd learn that, but you wouldn't see the same things in the press. So I think that picture might be in Humanitarian as well, the little lad that was blind who visited a concert. And then things like the Pepsi donation. Sorry, I apologise with the camera. I'm not sure how I'm holding these. So I think that was a way that Jackson fans, you know, Michael Jackson fans used to find out what he did. But that's why I think this book's so important, because apart from those, there's not many records of it. So that's why I think this book is amazing and such a good thing to have for the community.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of like I said at the start, like the sheer volume of it when you look at all the records, and as Paul just mentioned on the comments, there are so many acts of kindness and where he helped others, and more charities and donations that we'll never know about because he did them anonymously. So when you think about the fact that there was all of those that aren't documented plus all of this, it really does show just how much it was and how focused he was on being a humanitarian. And as a fan, you know, as a teenager, sort of through the 90s, you got little glimpses here and there of those sorts of things in the mainstream media. But as a whole, all of that side of him was largely denied or ignored, or, you know, you'd see a glimpse of it and it was twisted around. And yeah, that side of it is obviously devastating that it's not shown. So I guess it's up to us fans to try and promote that part of his legacy.
Well, I can remember from the 80s, before things with media gone really sour, there was a lot of reporting about this because he was so secretive about himself. There wasn't a lot known. So whatever he did, like any organization or whatever, they got really a spotlight on. So reading this, and we talked about it when we did the Moonwalker, I thought maybe that was intention too, you know? To not say a lot about himself, not give a lot about information, to have the other ones in the light. I remember that clearly, that because there was a lot of talking what he did in the 80s. Yeah. And then communication with media stopped, and then you didn't get to hear anything anymore.
Yeah, there was certainly a change in narrative. Just on saying things that weren't made public, I've got an example here. So he was known for, with the camera, sending lots of care packages. So this is a letter to Tenelian, I don't know how to say that name, and basically just sending her a care package, and then, oh goodness, sorry with the camera, and then he's included a Heal the World watch in there. So he was known for doing a lot of that as well. And I always remember hearing that as well, you know, obviously we know that he would go and shop for all the sort of gifts that he would take to hospitals, which is incredible. You know, he wasn't even sending out people to do it. But also, and I can't remember where this was, but I remember hearing that he sat, you know, till sort of small hours of the morning wrapping individual gifts himself, you know. How he found the time to do all this, but he cared that much that he found the time to do that. I think that's incredible. So I think there's lots that we will never hear or know about unless people come out and, you know, maybe contact Paul and get them into a newer version of the book. But I'm sure there's lots of people like that person who received that watch that got those. I've seen others that, you know, there's a Mickey Mouse cushion that was signed that was given to somebody who was ill, and, you know, many of these care packages that he would send to people.
Yeah, just to go back to something that I think it was what Daniela was saying before about the fact that it's just facts. There's no opinions. There's nothing that really non-MJ fans, let's say, can really argue with. And I think that more literature needs to be created towards non-fans. And obviously this is something that fans love and we cherish it, and there's lots that we're finding out as well. But I think that more literature like this needs to be made for non-fans. And for me, this is a perfect example because it doesn't really have Michael's biography. It doesn't have his story. It's not going on about how amazing he is and how, you know, how amazing his songs are. And, you know, it's like fact after fact after fact. It's very, the stories are very short and concise. It's almost like, you know, we're saying what needs to be said, with kind of no bias. There's no subjectivity there really, although there is a really lovely sort of opener from the author where actually Paul does talk about sort of being a fan and kind of his journey, I guess, with Michael, which for fans in particular is always really, really nice to hear. But I think this is the kind of book that needs to be created to show people objectively the kind of man that Michael was. And even if it is written by a fan, it needs to have that kind of objectivity about it so that a non-fan would read it and be like, oh, actually, you know, this isn't being written by someone who loves him, even though it is. This is full of facts. It's in chronological order. It's almost like a scientific textbook, really. These are a list of the things that Michael did. And I think that sort of books with this kind of format, I think more of them need to be created.
I would like to add something to this. When I start reading the book, normally I sit there and I can read for hours. This is my afternoon or my evening for reading. And I did this with this book, and then all of a sudden I noticed, well, I'm not getting anything anymore. It comes, it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I thought you have to go or approach it differently. You read 3 of the stories, 3 or 4 the most. And then you need to let it sink, because otherwise you just read on and it just gets all like in one and sounds a bit similar. And you have to read in smaller pieces, to really grasp and just you could say digest what's written there. Otherwise you just rush through it. So, and I think we should mention what Betty Lou just wrote there. That's a very interesting note.
Yeah, I was going to add that once there was a appropriate time to do so, but Betty Lou has just commented that she noticed while reading the book that his humanitarian work had a plan, like everything else he did. He divided his humanitarian work equally between things he did for individuals and things he did that had a lasting effect, like scholarships, things that even go on to this day. And when you think about it, it's so true. I mean, he didn't just support one kind of charity. He divided his efforts up across lots of different areas, from education to illnesses to even kids with special needs, homeless people. He made sure he was giving to all kinds of areas. And then he also, obviously, as Betty Lou pointed out, made sure he was giving, in some cases, like the story where he gives the vehicles, the vans to the group that looks after kids with special needs and disabilities, because that's something that they're going to be able to continue to use for a long time. And in other cases, it was setting up a scholarship that will continue to fund education for a long time. So it was obviously well thought out.
And also with individual people. I mean, if you read a story from Bela Farkas or from Dave, it's not just there you have the liver, now you live. No, it's the following treatment that needs to be paid. It's letting him have a good start in life. And Dave the same. It's not only just like for the moment. It's always continuing until the point you don't need it anymore. That's great to have that foresight.
And we know from Remember the Time, from Bill Whitfield's book, that his support of Dave in that way continued right up until he passed away. It wasn't just like the story in the book shows that he helped him years ago, but we also know that he continued to do that anonymously. We hear from Bill Whitfield in Remember the Time that he sent Bill to give Dave money. And I think that might have been 2008, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. So those anonymous things that he continued to do behind the scenes that we just may never hear about.
Yeah, and keep track of all these things, not forgetting somebody. I mean, this guy had so much going on in his life, and still he was remembering every single one. It just doesn't run from itself. Also, like, pick the charities. I mean, what do you pick? How do you give your money away? Yeah,
maybe he felt that way, Danielle.
Take some serious consideration and getting into things.
I like the way Paul lists the charities at the back, and it goes for a couple of pages, but 146, and those are maybe there's more that we're not aware of, but 146 different charities. It's quite staggering.
And Shari's just
add to. Sorry, Angie, go on.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, sorry, Emma, I know we've got the delay, that she just mentioned about Dave. We gave him jobs as well to keep him employed and feel valued. And I think that's it. He knew what people, and it's those stories as well of trying to give children hope to carry on who are terminal. So he really had an awareness of giving them some hope and some value and things like that. So Shari just mentioned that. Over to you, Emma.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of things that I wanted to add. There's so many stories in the book of, yes, Michael paying for kind of future treatment. So, for example, there's a couple of stories where he pays for an initial transplant, but then he also, pays for subsequent treatment for the next couple of years, whatever. But in addition to that, there's also quite a few examples of, if he can't provide that follow-up treatment, he's ringing them on a frequent basis. What's an update? How are you? How are you doing? How are you getting on? And there's a lot of testimony in this book about Michael's impact, not just on seeming to physically heal people, but actually emotionally and mentally heal people as well. And we all know that the physical body responds very much to the mental kind of state. And there's a lot of examples in the book of people who have said, I don't think that this patient would have got through what they did. I know that there was one in particular example of someone who was really suffering with depression. They did have some sort of physical ailment. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head at the moment, but that she was really depressed. And actually, after Michael had visited her and was kind of keeping in frequent contact with her, she kind of made a full recovery, and they don't think that she necessarily would have done that. People that are in dire straits physically, at some point, it's obviously common for them to feel like, I can't keep up this fight anymore. And Michael just really gave them that fight back. He gave them a reason to keep going. And I was actually going to share this at the end, but I think this is a really good moment to bring up probably one of my favourite quotes from the book, which I believe was an addition to the revised version. So at the back of the revised version, there are kind of anecdotes, and it's entitled "From Those Who Knew Michael." So you've got, Travis Payne, Frank DeLeo, you've got Janet Jackson, but it was the very last quote, and I think I've posted this on the group, but this is something that for me, again, it just really says it all about who he was, and that this really did come from his heart. And it says, this is from David Nordal, who was Michael's personal artist and friend of 20 plus years. And he says, I asked him, Michael, how can you do that? How can you spend time with these children who are dying and then go from that to on stage and give that kind of performance? He said, how could I not? If these children want to see me, I know I'm not important, but Michael Jackson, the superstar, is. And if I can make a child live an extra minute or an hour or a day or a month, then wouldn't that be worth it? Michael was always that way. If he would get a call from somebody and a child was dying, he would get on a plane and go, and he would tell them, I'm going to be back in 2 weeks to see you. And a lot of the times he extended little kids' lives that way. To look forward to down the line, you have to admire something like that. I think that was the thing. There's lots of there's lots of really big shows of humanitarianism with his visits to the orphanages, to the children's hospitals, but there are so many individual cases, even in this book, individual cases where he's helping an individual person. He's heard about something on the news, or something's happened in LA, or while he's touring, he's heard about this tragic story that touches him. And, he reaches out to that individual and really changes their life, whether it's physically, emotionally, financially, whatever they need. And there's just so many of those kind of smaller acts of kindness where he's not, visiting these kind of facilities and stuff that people need to know about. one of the other things that I was thinking when you were talking about Betty Lynch, you know, when she said that he really had a plan for everything. I think one of the things as well that you kind of get from the book, but that I know has been discussed on the book club as well, is the fact that when he toured, he would choose specific places to go to so that he could help that particular community. And, you know, just on the history tour alone, he donated around $45 million throughout the duration of the history tour alone. So, you know, particularly for the dangerous and the history tours, where he's kind of stopped off, obviously there would be obvious places to stop off, but a lot of the stops would be places that he knew needed that humanitarian work, and he would be able to offer that while he was there on tour, and you know, get the kids to the concerts and stuff like that. And I think even for the dangerous tour, he said that his only purpose for the Dangerous World Tour was to spread, this is a quote, to spread the message of global love in the hope that others too will be moved to do their share to help heal the world. And I think from that dangerous tour in particular, I think his whole, and I know that we've spoken about this before on other sessions, but I think his whole being was about healing the world. And that was his purpose for touring.
Just on that, Emma, where you were just saying about the humanitarian work where he taught, it was also economic regeneration as well. He was very aware of the impact of his tour going there and helping an area economically. So, you know, again, I think shows his vast awareness and intelligence of so many aspects of how the world works and, you know, how things can improve and social situations. I don't know if there's a delay there, Emma, if you're going on to the next thing.
Yeah, so sorry, because there's a delay, I'm just trying to give people the chance to finish discussing that particular topic area before I move on. Yeah, so let's see humanitarian work through his songs. So we are going to come back later to kind of talking about sort of some more of the more individual and specific cases, but, you know, again, I feel that from the kind of dangerous period onwards, I think that because Michael felt that he had this purpose, he felt that he was there to use his influence as a singer, as a superstar to heal the world. You know, he did so much through his songs. I mean, even from before that, but particularly from that time forward, to, you know, to give to the world and to give to society. The book mentions that We Are the World has raised over $150 million for various causes, just that one song alone. The ongoing proceeds from Man in the Mirror go to Camp Ronald McDonald for good times, even to this day. So any proceeds that song makes go straight to charity. What More Can I Give? Raised $10 million for the 9/11 victims. Really interesting that in the book it said, and this is something that I didn't know, that Sony did not release the song, which apparently Michael felt, the word in the book that Paul uses is he felt bewildered about that, because as far as he was concerned, they were going to release it immediately and then obviously generate a lot more revenue, but Sony refused to release the song. You've got a song called Children's Holiday, which is a very little known song, I would imagine, that was, I believe, sort of given to a Japanese group so that all profits could go to the victims of an earthquake back in '95. Another song, Spirit of Life, which was with Reby and Jermaine. There's so much, again, behind the scenes, these kind of, yes, Man in the Mirror, we know We Are the World, but there's so many other songs and work through his music he did in order to to raise money. And again, that raising of money is still going on today. So again, when we talk about the long-term impact of things, you know, the fact that the proceeds from Man in the Mirror, again, they're still going to charity. That's something that he foresaw, and he made sure that, you know, that would continue.
I was just gonna. Sorry, I'm not sure when you can hear when we're speaking or not. But the other song to mention, obviously, I think is such an amazing song is Earth Song, because it's not obviously it's about the whole environment as well, and I think that's so key, even more so today. I do remember that actually making quite a big impact in the non-fan community as well, and certainly I think in the UK. That song was, you know, really a big hit, and people, you know, did listen to its message. So it was really impactful. And I think you really see a lack of that now in anybody else really putting out songs like that with those kind of messages in.
Yeah, I'm going to give you another dimension now, because Emma brought up Dangerous World Tour, and he didn't really want to do that, and all the proceeds went into his charities. There is this book, Die Kunstwerke von Michael Jackson. It's only in German. Yeah, it's not available in English. Yeah, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of this, like just a little excerpt now. And I found this when I read that, it gave me goosebumps. And again, some things fell into place. I just looked it up. There I have it. Because, haha, girls, I translated some into English for you. In 1989, the two artists formed the Jackson Strong Alliance. Together, they wanted to create an art enterprise that would be most dynamic in the world. They wanted nothing less than to improve the world with their imagination, with their art, for the benefit of children all over the planet. They planned the means of implementation in many ways, with works of art, sculptures, special architectures, publications, and even entertainment elements. They combined their plans with Michael's Dangerous Tour, with this goal to let the proceeds flow into the Heal the World Foundation, as well as in many projects to benefit of children. Just this little bit. So, Brad Livingston Strong also took a big part in this whole planning of Dangerous Tour. There's more to come, I promise you.
You're going to translate the entire book for us, aren't you? I think you're on mute then, Daniela. I saw you.
Are you waiting for an answer now?
No. I think Emma, we finished. If you want to carry on.
Yes, so let's move on to talking about some of the kind of, well, let's continue to talk about some of the smaller acts. I did actually make a brief list of all of the kind of different areas that Michael, you know, donated to and had part in helping, and it was, I mean, it was everything from education, the environment, racial divide, physical and mental illness, illiteracy, drug and alcohol abuse, war, famine, problems specific to the African American community, corruption, voting rates, parenting. I mean, I just, you know, he kind of recognized every single possible issue that there was in the world and in society, and he had a part in you know, in trying to improve that. And Angie, one of the things that Michael did, which, I mean, it's kind of more of a smaller scale thing, because you know, when I think about bigger scale stuff, I'm thinking like stuff, you know, where he went to an orphanage and he gave lots of presents, and or he went to a children's hospital and the media were there and stuff. But I mean, one of the things that I would say is maybe on a smaller scale was the Oxford Union speech, which I know has been brought up. And interestingly, I know that you said that one of the differences between the revised version and the original version is that the revised version of the book actually includes the full Oxford Union speech. And actually, you were there.
Yeah, I was very lucky. Of course, I didn't get asked to go by Michael Jackson. We were a little bit crafty, and some of us had a fake pass, which back in those days used to work. I'm sure now with electronic things, we'd never get those kind of opportunities. But yeah, I was lucky enough to be there, sitting just I think I was either on the second or third row. So I was extremely close to him while giving that speech. It is one of the most incredible experiences of my life. I mean, I've had quite a few, obviously, around Michael, which is amazing. But I don't know, do you want me to sort of go in talking more about that now? Or I don't know, just carry on with that one. I mean, Paul has put all the text of this speech in there. I also recommend that if you just go onto YouTube and actually listen to him, you know, giving the speech, because I think it just adds more to it when you hear him. So yeah, I was lucky enough to get in there. Obviously, it was all the excitement and obviously the terror of thinking we might get caught out and thrown out before he came into the room, but we luckily managed to stay throughout it. It is Oxford University, so obviously I'm sure most of you around the world have probably heard of it, but it's obviously our #1 university in the UK. Had a lot of famous people go through the Oxford University over the years. And I think that's when Michael came to speak there. It was mainly Oxford Union students. Apparently there was 20,000 applied for tickets to go in there. I can't say exactly how many were in there. I don't know if somebody else knows, but I'd probably estimate that there was a few hundred in there. There were just sort of above in a gallery as well, and there was benches seated, and so I was very lucky to be right near the front. Michael came in, he'd broken his ankle not long before that, so he hobbled in. And I think what was amazing was as he spoke, obviously you're surrounded by a lot of people that aren't his fans, you know, lots of sort of educated, you know, upper class, probably a lot of them, students there, and they're all waiting, and you're kind of wondering what reaction he's going to get. And it was really magical because he started his speech. And I mean, if you listen to it, he brings in quite a bit of humour, and that sort of broke the ice with a lot of them straight away. You can hear, if you actually hear a recording of it, you hear the laughter, and that was great because I think he won people over very, very quickly by bringing in those bits of humour. He mentioned Kermit the Frog. He makes a quote about, you know, there's a face only a mother could love, that kind of thing. So he did get them really, you know, everyone sort of laughing, and really felt that people really warmed to him. And then I think he showed his intelligence and his awareness of things. And then he, at the beginning, sort of went in a little bit about his childhood, but then went more to his agenda and understanding and why he was creating this foundation, Heal the Kids, and what the, you know, the motivation of it was. And again, shows his deep understanding that sort of most of the problems you have in the world go back to people's childhood. So whether it's the people committing crimes, you know, why are they doing that? You know, what are their circumstances? But also just general, you know, people being broken, parents being broken, and things that are really key and important. And he goes through his sort of agenda of, you know, bedtime stories and the importance of those kind of things, being heard as a child. And then he goes on to delve a little bit more into his own childhood and about Joseph. And I mean, I have to admit personally, and due to sort of my own circumstances in childhood, that when he started on that bit, the floodgates opened for me. He told a story of how much it meant to him, Joseph just lifting him onto a pony, and that really hit with me with something from myself, and that just sort of set me off. And I was a bit of a blubbering wreck there on the thing. And Michael, you hear as well, again, if you hear him giving the speech, he actually just started to cry at one bit where he's talking about his father and he asked for a tissue. And that was quite hard to sit there and watch, because I felt like I wanted to go give him a hug, and everyone's just sort of there waiting, and there isn't that, nobody's sort of going there ready to comfort him. But yeah, it was a fantastic speech. It was very, very emotional. And for me personally, the reason, obviously, there's an element of I was always going to be quite like, oh, because this is Michael Jackson in front of me, who I'm a huge fan of. But for me personally, he really spoke to me and stuff that I'd gone through that I had never seen or heard of before anywhere else. I hadn't read any books about things like that. At that age, I'd never spoke to a therapist or anything. And it really, really just reached into me, and he had such a deep understanding. And I can imagine he did that, for so many people. And to be honest, I left that speech and I was crying for hours, because it brought so much of my own things forward. And he was just amazing at that. He showed himself to all of those people in there, how educated he was, how this was really what he was into. He certainly didn't go there being this big star. He was speaking, and he really did explain himself well. And I always feel that if he could have had more airtime like that in main media, people would have understood him a lot more. I can't imagine anybody who was in there in that room, or those students, would ever believe the allegations, because after hearing all that he had to say, I think you get the true, meaning of him and what he was about. So it just sort of, it blew me away. And what was really lovely is, obviously, because we often hear so much negative from people who aren't fans, was, I was in there, people didn't know I was a fan, and you could hear them all talking afterwards and how blown away people were, and just that was not what they expected at all from him. And it was really nice to hear that excitement and those real positivity about him from people who weren't fans. So it was really an incredible experience, and one I'll never forget. But it's really lovely to have all the text there again for Michael's legacy and the revised version. But as well, I would say for anybody, go and listen to him saying it as well. On YouTube, there's a few places you can actually listen to the speech. But and again, when people say about his aura, I find it hard to be objective on that. I don't know how much is his aura and how much is when you're a fan of his, that magic anyway. But it does feel like that. It does feel like he really does have that energy and really captivates you. And I think I felt that from other people, those people who were just university students who, weren't necessarily Michael Jackson fans. You could almost feel that coming from them as well, but I can't necessarily always be that objective about it, with being a fan. But yeah, an amazing experience.
And it didn't end there, did it? Because you were also present when Michael flew to Disney to get Thea and Minnie, and then brought them to the Queen Elizabeth Children's Hospital.
Yes, that's another experience that Paul brings up in the book. That was actually obviously before the Oxford speech. It was in '92, the day before one of the Wembley concerts, and that was my first time ever to see Michael Jackson in person. So I became a fan after seeing Moonwalker in the cinema, and so it was a couple of years. Then obviously was the Dangerous tour. So I was lucky enough to be in Haggerston Park. I know that I think you put some questions in there before that Nicole was going to say, and I think because we're having a delay, I'll probably just run through those anyway. But about how did I know he was there? Well, this was 1992. We certainly didn't have mobile phones. I remember I was originally from the centre of England, a place called Derby, and so I had to get down to London. I'd come down anyway. I was only 16 on a National Express bus, and was staying with a friend, but then once Michael was in the country, staying outside the Dorchester Hotel. And I think you tended to hear things through the fan clubs, and it sort of filtered through. So we knew he was coming by helicopter to there from Luton Airport. So headed there that morning. There is a little clip of from news on YouTube as well from that time, because there was actually a Daily Mirror photographer who Michael was actually suing, who had done a hideous photo that had been obviously messed around with. It was on the front pages of the Daily Mirror in the UK, and he was in attendance with his very long lens, and he was actually had manure thrown over him by quite a few fans that I actually know. You can see me in the background kind of giggling. I wasn't actually doing the throwing. I think I was probably too scared to break rules because I was a bit of a comply with things, but it was quite amusing because he did get attacked with all this manure. But yeah, Michael came and he had Mickey and Minnie that he'd actually fetched from Euro Disney, and then they went off to the Children's Hospital, and he went around there. And again, the sad thing was, seeing the press the next day, it was all negative. So it was, oh, he left them in tears, he was only there for moments, and all that kind of thing. But you know, again, not the truth, but luckily afterwards as well, he went off to, I think it was Hamleys that afternoon, so we saw him there, and at Dorchester. But yeah, that was another great experience, and my first time ever seeing him. So I have to say, I was a bit of a state again, not crying this time, but adrenaline all over the place.
See, even that, you know, like, he could have just got someone to dress up as Mickey and Minnie, right? But no, as we know Michael to be, that's not magic. So he actually goes and gets the real deal from Disney and brings them to London. I think it's the small details like that. And I know I keep saying it, but, you know, like loads of celebrities do charity work, but I think it's those small details that tell you that, you know, Michael meant it. He wasn't just doing it for show. He wasn't just doing it to tick a box or, you know, to kind of help his image or whatever. You know, he always went the extra mile and always, you know, did the maximum possible, I guess, to improve these people's lives, or to give them that moment of happiness.
And
there was one other, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to add that the shame of how it's just so sad that it wasn't ever portrayed that way. Like Angie mentioned, the negative media after the visit from Mickey and Minnie. I was actually listening the other day to, and I have heard the full version before, and correct me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Is it Piers Morgan? Is that how you say his name? Yeah.
Yeah, Piers Morgan. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the interview that he did. It's just a phone interview that he did with Michael. And I don't know the year, I'm sorry. And I have heard the full speech, but I can't find it again now. But you can see like sort of excerpts from that speech on YouTube now, because it was replayed again, I believe, in 2019 when Piers Morgan was actually defending him. But you can hear little excerpts of that interview, and one of the things he's talking about is the negative press, and he specifically mentions when he bought Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and how he went to all that effort and all they did was make fun of him. And you can hear the pain in his voice that that it is portrayed the way that it is portrayed and not for what it actually is. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that I know it's a sad side of it, and the book being as important as it is to show the real Michael Jackson, I suppose to emphasize to us as fans the importance of trying to show that side of his legacy, because it was something that was never shown appropriately or to the extent it should have been when it was happening.
And Angie, there was one more thing that you got to do, which, you know, is not quite as good as the other two. I mean, you only got to spend the day at Neverland, right?
Yeah, so Paul mentions in his book about, you know, the children that used to get to visit. Obviously, I'm not going to say I was there as a child, but the children that used to get to visit there in Neverland. And I think we all know that, you know, the reasons why Michael created Neverland. And again, obviously, something that's not widely known in the main media. This was 1999. I got there. It was August. I don't know the exact date, and I think you'll all probably be horrified by this, but I'm not someone who writes diaries or journals, and so I never went away and wrote it all down, which I know is crazy, but I didn't. So basically, I'd been to Neverland twice before, just seeing the gates. And on the second visit, I went into the little Santa Ynez town and just went to, I mean, it is so tiny for those of you who haven't been. It's really, really quaint little place. And there was one kind of restaurant come bar, and that is it. And I was very lucky. I just started talking to the waitress, who was a young girl called Emily, and started just asking her, had she ever seen Michael Jackson? Happens her mum worked there, and her boyfriend had won, again, another example of Michael's humanitarian efforts. He'd actually won 6 tickets to spend a day in Neverland at the high school summer fete. So Michael had donated that as a prize to the school. So he'd got 6 tickets. So I kind of said, well, would you be interested in selling any of these? So I was just extremely lucky who I came across in the timing. She spoke to her boyfriend, and clearly they had no idea of the value of this. We got them for $60. So I got 3 of them, because they were then her boyfriend and another friend went. So it was 6 of us. We booked a day. I had no idea that there was going to be all these other children who, when we got there, we actually turned out there was coach loads came after us. All these coaches pulling up, and there was basically 250 little black kids from an LA ghetto. And I think it might have been Big Al who explained to us that, you know, they never had a holiday, they hadn't been to a theme park or anything. And it was an incredible, I mean, being in there anyway was absolutely incredible. But seeing those children as well, that was amazing. You know, when we went off on the train, I had one of them sat on my lap and we were chatting, and just seeing their excitement, it was out of the world. They'd never got the chance to go to somewhere like Disneyland. They were running around, going crazy, laughing, having so much fun. You know, we went on all the rides, we went to the zoo, we went in the theatre. And luckily, because Big Al recognised us from when he'd come to a fan party in the UK, he actually said, look, when the kids are in the arcade and they're occupied, I'll take you into the house. So I was very lucky as well to get to go into Michael's house. So the kids all played in the arcade. And the thing is, and it's said in Paul's book, but it certainly is true. I mean, there is just sweets and drinks everywhere. Everything is free. Help yourself to as much as you want. And you can imagine these kids. It was just, I mean, it was Christmas times a million for them. They were running around, grabbing everything, going on the rides, just having the time of their lives. Lots of sort of fun and laughter. There was, again, I think it's on Paul's documentary, where you see a kid and they've got all the trays outside and they're serving up the food, and that's exactly what it was like. They had, it was a massive barbecue out there, and, you know, again, everybody got fed. I mean, that's an incredible number of people they were given food. Yeah, so it was incredible seeing them, and obviously for myself it was incredible just being in there and going into his house, and, you know, I went through photo albums and stuff like that. It was a magical day. But those kids, it was seeing that firsthand, seeing, And Michael wasn't there. I mean, we obviously had the excitement that you signed the paperwork when you first get there to say he might come in. You can't take photographs in there, you're not allowed to take cameras. But he might be there. He wasn't, but you know, there was always that hope. But anyway, it was such a magical place, just for me anyway. But seeing those kids, what it did for them, he didn't have to be there to still provided so much magic to them, which I'm sure they'll never ever forget. Because just talking to a couple of the kids, and they were funny and they were cheeky. You know, the amazing fun. They were just on such a high from it, and they hadn't experienced anything like that before in their lives. It was an incredible thing to see, and that's truly what Neverland was really about. It's just such a shame that obviously again it got sort of darkened with everything, but it really was such a magical place.
I'd like to add to that quickly, because one of the things that I definitely wanted to raise from this book was the importance of getting the real image of Neverland out there, because one of the biggest things that people just don't get is the whole Neverland thing. Why would he build a theme park for kids? You know, he's obviously grooming them and stuff. And actually in the book, it says that Michael reiterates that his home is always open to the needy, as well as families and fans from around the world. At least 2 to 4 times a month, hundreds of inner city and underprivileged children and adults spent their time exploring Michael's ranch, all free of charge, and often even during his absence there. You know, this is not somewhere that was being used to kind of lure individual children. Like it was a free, it was what we would call an open house. Even in his absence, you know, whoever wants to come basically can come. Anyone who, you know, is a fan, or if you want to come with their through the Make-A-Wish Foundation or whatever, his doors were wide open to anyone who wanted to visit. And it's important to add as well, it wasn't just children who visited there, and a lot of his work was done around the military. And I know that one of the stories that it talks about in the book is inviting military men and their families. You know, Neverland was a place for everybody to just, it was a place for escapism. No matter what was going on in your life, what physical trauma, mental trauma you were going through, it was a place where you could go and just, you know, forget the difficulties of your reality and just go and enjoy and let your hair down. And actually, Darina has written that she was lucky enough to go there too, to Neverland, in April 2005, Day of the Roses. So we've got another viewer who was lucky enough to go to Neverland, which is absolutely amazing. And if you want to share, Darina, a little bit more about your experience, then I'm happy to put your comment up on the screen while we're sort of continuing the discussion. So we'd be interested more about that. Daniela, I believe you worked for, or you volunteered for one of the charities that Michael was involved in. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yes, that was in 1989. I spent the summer as a camp counselor in a regular summer camp. And at the end of the summer, I got asked earlier that Camp Happy Time comes in. Camp Happy Times is a charity which is also mentioned in the book, helps children with cancer, to have just a very nice week and just let go, you know, be kids again. And they're facing really like hard problems and have to grow up really quickly and have all these adult issues, and that was a charity for that. So they would come in. We had from different areas. I was in New Jersey. The town was called Newton, and we had one tour coming from New York and the other from Philadelphia, and it was also always underprivileged kids it was always kids, inner city kids, and yeah, I can really rely to that. What was that now? They never did something like that before. They wouldn't have parents who can afford to give them like 1 or 2 or 3 weeks summer camp. So yeah, I have to say that influenced me for the rest of my life, of course, as what you can think. Yeah, of course, I said yes, as I mentioned before. By this time, there was some information going out, and I knew about this charity, and that Michael was for it and gave money to it. Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. At the beginning, I thought how I'm gonna do it, but it's so amazing how these kids went on with this. For them, it was just normal. They were just children, you know. Of course, they had bald heads and they had like pipes sticking out of their chest. And yes, I have also to say it was like almost all children with a very bad prognosis, so you would know they do not live another year. And that was the program also about, just to give them a whole year again. So we did, during this week, we did all the holidays. We had a Christmas, we had Halloween. Yeah, that was all there. So evening programs, entertainment. We the counselors, while I was camp staff, they would bring in other counselors, volunteers, who work with the charity, and we were just there to support, to keep the camp running. So, which I was working as a counselor before. Obviously, I could not do that with these children, but I was like working in the office then, or you would just go wherever they need you, also washing dishes. Yeah. So the one thing, what also was like, you had to do this. We were sleeping in the same cabins with these children. So every camp staff had to sleep in a cabin, yes, with the volunteers, but also with the children. And I got to stay with the very small ones, like talking 6 or 7 years. So there was one many night where I would like go in the bunk of a child, or they would just crawl into mine, because they were like happy kids during the day, but nighttime was really different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was that. So, and all I can say that, yeah, as I said, that made me another person, of course. And Michael touched my life in so many ways. And not only this, like it's always like you follow my life, it's always something to connect. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what to say more about this. It's just, yeah.
I was just going to say, Daniela,
Needless to say, they are not alive anymore. So don't ask me if I'm still in touch. Yeah, and I was pointing out this. We also had Make-A-Wish Foundation come in, and something I remember very clearly about this thing. There was one young guy. He must have been like 14 or 15, and he was like a passionate. What do you call this? When you go on skis, a water skier. Yeah, and they already took a leg off him, so he only had one leg left, and the leg was like taken off right at the hip. Yeah, so they came in and they had something prepared which they could put on the speedboat, and it took them 3 days to figure out how to make him do water skiing, and they succeeded after 3 days. So that guy went around 3 times around Stickle Pond. Yeah, that was Make-A-Wish coming in. Yeah, I remember them like 2 or 3 times being in, but I cannot really recall. It was like little things, but I remember this very clearly, because the whole camp, you would always go down to the pond and see what they are doing, and they were really 3 days they would work with them, and then he went all around. Yeah.
That's lovely, Daniela. I was just going to say to you before, I think it's really nice that you went on to do those things. And I think the other thing, just to quickly mention, is that impact that Michael has on people who then go on to do things. I mean, One charity which I love, which obviously Dee Pfeiffer mainly runs, is Michael Jackson's Legacy. Amazing work she's done. If you look at what she's achieved, and obviously the others that work with her on that charity. I did some stuff. We had Heal the Kids, I think that was its name, in London, and we did a children's festival, and they did work in LA as well. There's so many sort of other charities and work that fans go on to do inspired by him, which I just think is worth mentioning, because his legacy continues with that. I mean, obviously we know as well 20% of his estate still goes to charity, but he just still has that incredible impact. So I just think that's worth mentioning.
I'd like to say something about that as well, because in the book, and actually when you watch the documentary, you see there's a girl, I believe her name was Tiffany. Sorry, it's the one sheet that I don't have, but I'm sure her name was Tiffany, and she was the girl that Michael invited up on stage. So I think that she, through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, she asked to meet Michael, and she was the one where he said, "Oh my God, you could have asked for anything, and that, you know, you asked to meet me." And he was so kind of shocked that someone would ask to meet him. And he then sort of invited her up on stage to dance with him to Bad. But I know from the documentary, she actually does an interview for the documentary. So this is like the little nice additions to the book. By watching the documentary, you kind of get to see some of them now. And you know, she works for Make-A-Wish Foundation, so she obviously felt a huge impact through the experience that she had had through this charity, that she now works for them. And of course there's the other story, which I'm really embarrassed because I can't remember his name, but it was the guy, the picture is Michael signing his leg cast, and again he was so impacted by his meeting with Michael that he does various kind of jobs within the Michael Jackson community. So I believe he hosts the MJ Day, the annual conference. I think he's involved in the King fan website. You know, he's kind of got lots of involvement within the MJ community. So, I mean, he's an example of someone that hasn't necessarily gone on to do charity work, but through his meeting Michael through the charity work, you know, Michael obviously impacted on him in such a way that he feels he wants to spend the rest of his life, I guess, committing himself to Michael's legacy and to the Michael Jackson community. So yeah, I think that, thanks Sherry, Joe Jenish, that's right, Sherry's just reminded me of his name. Michael just touched so many people's lives, whether it was small scale, you know, you hear stories of when he's driving, I don't know, like to the airport, and he'll stop and engage with homeless people on the street. You know, that's something I know, again, that Bill Whitfield reiterated in his book, examples of Michael talking to people on the streets. And, you know, no cameras, no media there, doesn't have to do it. Most people wouldn't, but he did. This book's just so important for all of those, really, to see the impact that Michael had on the world. And I think even when you're a fan, you don't always realise the huge impact that he did have. But, you know, so many countries, so many cities, so many individuals, so many facilities that he visited, donated to, so many families whose lives he touched as well. I mean, there's lots of testimonies in the book from families who spoke about the impact that he had on them, you know, as much as on their, for example, their children who were unwell, but actually how he gave them hope as well, and what an impact it was for them to see their children so happy. And just an unbelievable amount of positivity, I guess, for want of a better word. It's not a big enough word for what he gave to people, but just gave them that touch of magic, I guess. Paul, thank you. Yeah, so Tiffany Rowe, I think that was the girl that I was talking about, wasn't it? And he's just brought up a quote that she said, "There is power in hope." And he said, you know, it speaks volumes about many of the humanitarian acts that Michael did. And that's exactly right. He gave hope to people, whether it was, like I said before, whether it was for a day, a week, a month, a year, 2 years, he gave people hope. And actually, from lots of fan discussions that I've had with people, I think a lot of people get involved with Michael as a fan for that very reason. I know that we've had discussions on previous sessions about how, you know, there might have been kind of childhood situations that some of us were going through that, you know, Michael's music gave us that hope. He gave us that comfort. He gave us that belief that actually, you know, things were going to be okay. And so to be able to do that through his music as well. And that's why I don't think that we should underestimate the power of his music. I think his music in itself, even if the actual song itself wasn't a humanitarian song, I think just his work in general and his music healed a lot of people.
I want to add something to this about Michael's reputation in the world. Right after my time in the camp, I went into tourism, and I really did tour the world. You know, there are very little places I haven't been in 30 years. So, and as I said, Michael impacted my life, because Michael was literally the door opener for me to many people. Because, I mean, you sit on a tour bus with a tour guide and a bus driver. You don't know them, but you know you spent a week with them. So you've got to break the ice. And I just always, no? Somehow you always can bring up the subject Michael Jackson. And everybody in the world knows Michael Jackson. Everybody has an opinion and everybody has to say something. So that would get into conversation, that would break the ice and finding common ground. And I can tell you, through my experience, I did not have not once in all this conversation somebody who told me, oh, that child molester or whatever. So I am not sure why we are always fixated so much on the bad reputation or whatever. He is not perceived like this in the world, I can tell you from first hand. He speaks for himself through his music, through his message. So you just stop to be like always focused on that. And I think Paul was so right with what he said in his interview. Yeah, our goal should be to overlayer that. I found that was such a great thing to say. Yeah, that our goal should be to overlayer that bad thing. When you Google him, Michael Jackson, and of course you get the bad press there. Yeah, you don't get the person in Suriname, the bus driver, what he says. Yeah, but you get this publication from the press, and we should not talk about all the negative things all the time. Talk about the good things. You know, I don't know the fans who are not that long fans yet, if they know, there was once a project. If you don't know it, you just go ahead now and you do it now. You put up Google and you put in the most beautiful smile in the world. And then you see the pictures coming. And you see all Michael Jackson pictures. So that was done from somebody. And we can do that again. And not just spread the bad things and talk about the bad things and talk about the bad press and the art and just when that's gone. Yeah. Let's talk about the good things. And I think Paul is so right. And I wish Paul would just walk with the torch in front of us. And I'm always so like, yeah, all these stories have to come. And I know I had some discussion, or I read some discussion people had, why are these people are not coming out when they hear him being so bashed or whatever. This is also something I remember Paul mentioned in his interview. I also watched simultaneously the presentation of the film in Amsterdam in Square One, yeah. And it was so touching. There was one girl, and she was just like you could literally hear that she was waiting already the whole time to tell her story, and then she was so in tears telling this. And this was already like 25 years ago, yeah. Unfortunately, they cut it out. Maybe she wanted it because she really cried hard, yeah. Now I lost my thread. Yeah. To do this, and I wonder always, like with Tom Mesereau, with this book, because he announced that he wants to collect these stories. Paul, do you know anything of this? Maybe if you are in touch with Touch, to get this on. Yeah. I think there are a lot of stories out there and they need to be told. And these people just wait for a platform to do it. I mean, and then I read these threads like, why are they not telling? How are they supposed to tell? Are they supposed to call BBC and put themselves in front of a camera and say, well, this and this and this happened? Yeah, you know what will happen to you. Yeah. So I really hope your project goes on, Paul. I will do my utmost. I pledge to you now. Next one, please.
I think it's a really important point, because I think as fans, it's really easy to be sucked into that negative, to and fro with the non-fans, and we almost feel like we need to spend our lives defending him. But we focus on the allegations, don't we? We say, well, here's proof that he didn't do this. Well, why don't we do more? Here's proof of what an amazing guy he was. Because the problem is, when we put up these negative things, he didn't do this because look at this lie that Wade Robson told, for example. You're drawing the attention to the lie that Wade Robson's told, that we believe is the lie. So therefore, if the person who's reading it didn't know about what Wade Robson was saying before, they do now. And I think that, you're always going to come across as, oh, well, she's a fan, so she's going to say that. Whereas, if you put these facts, like what's in this book, in front of people, like I said, they're objective facts. There's no bias there. It's not coming from me. It's not my opinion. And actually, it's got nothing to do with the allegations and stuff. It's just like, look at what an amazing man he was. And I definitely think that we need to focus more on that, and more needs to be put out there in the mainstream media and into the wider public, because I do think that's going to be the thing that kind of turns the tables. And I do feel that the tables are being turned. I really do. Okay, let's go on to our favourite stories from the book. So we've each chosen a story that we have specifically not discussed yet, because we wanted to kind of share it ourselves. So Nicole, you wanted to discuss a visit to a children's hospital in Sydney.
I didn't purposely choose an Australian one, but it just happened to turn out that way. But one thing I really enjoyed was all the quotes that Paul has used from either the kids who got to meet Michael, or in some cases the parents who made comment about the amazing impact that Michael had. And I think that's probably why I chose this story. So it's from November 18th, 1987. I'll just pop it up there. So, oops, I'm showing. So it's that one there. And Michael was visiting the children's hospital, and he met one boy who had been in an accident and actually lost his eye. But it's the quote from his mum that just really stands out to me. She talks about how she'll never forget that day as long as she lived, the amazing generosity of giving all the toys away. And then she talks about how he visited each child personally and quietly spoke words of comfort to them. I'll never forget the delight of these children, the medical staff and the parents who visited that day. She goes on, and I'm going to start crying if I read any more, but she finishes with saying, Michael, I know you are with the angels, and may God bless your soul. Rest assured, you live on in our hearts forever. Thank you for the music. It's just so touching that he was able to touch lives in that way.
And Angie, you wanted to discuss the Cleveland Elementary School visit.
Yeah, so I've got the original, oh God, the camera, sorry, original one. So I can't tell you exactly what page it is on, but it's in the new, obviously, version as well. Just to say as well, I mean, I've got the original news article of this. I just don't have it to hand at the moment. But if you just Google about this, you'll see some absolutely beautiful photos from that, just because his smile and everything is truly magical. So the story of this was February 7th, 1989. I don't probably really have a favourite. There's just so much. It's when you read this book, and just whenever I read anything about what he did, I end up in tears of like how lovely he was, but also the sadness of some of the stories. But this one, I just brought up, it was a school shooting. I was 14 at the time, and I remember it being very much on the news, and how terrifying hearing that as a child was, that, you know, 5 children were dead, 39 had been shot, 1 teacher was dead. And can just remember the sort of the horrifying news of all of this on there, and how awful that must be. One, you know, obviously being a parent, waiting to hear that news, is your child been injured, but being that child and being so terrified and not really know what's going on. A couple of weeks after it, that happened on the 17th of January, and a couple of weeks after, Michael visited them, and the pictures saying, oh, you see his big smile, he's really there, lifting spirits. He took lots and lots of gifts. So I think Paul describes it as well as truckloads, and I've seen it at other places referred to that, truckloads of gifts to them. He sat with them, he spoke to them, he joked with them, and basically just really lifted everyone's spirits. Those that were too sick, he also went and visited afterwards. And there's one, and I'm probably going to say his name wrong. It sounds like it's possibly a sort of a Thai or a Filipino name to me. Tharn Tron, who was 8-year-old, who had lost his brother who had been killed. He said that he remembered Michael visiting and said, I didn't want to go back to school, but after Michael came, I thought the world was safe again. It's possible to dream, and there is hope after all. Again, that sort of message of hope. And I just think out of such a awful incident, he went there, he did that, you know, to inspire those children to go back to school was something amazing. And, you know, he speaks, like at the Oxford speech, as well, of sort of school shootings and how awful it is, that our response to that is putting sort of metal detectors rather than getting to the root of the problem. But I just find that one's, you know, a really beautiful, and the photos of him that day, you can just see the magic he really brought to that school after such a tragic event. So I really love that story. Oh, sorry, and just to add on that, after that horrible thing that we won't mention, there was actually a radio DJ, and I can't remember his name. I don't know if other people have seen it, but he was just doing an interview, and people never knew this about him. He was actually one of the DJs on the show, and he was one of the boys who were in that class. And he spoke about it, and amazed obviously all his colleagues around him. He just sort of said, oh, I remember when Michael Jackson came to our school, and he really put across very well what a massive difference that made and how huge it was. No other celebrities, nobody did anything for that school, but Michael Jackson heard about it. And I think that's the thing you hear once he's been made aware of these stories. It really touches him, and he really goes to try to do something about them. So yeah, that's my one.
And Daniela, which story did you choose?
Well, I choose, in your book, you'll find it in the new one on page 101. It's Chrissy's story from Dublin. Yeah, she sits in a wheelchair, and she cannot feel her one arm and hand, and Michael touches her, and she believes that she felt a tingling. She could, like normally, she would not feel her hand, and she could feel the warmth in the hand, and in the night she would feel the tingling, and like her and her mom, they couldn't really make it out what happens, and her mom went then, well, with all this positive energy, like 30,000 people singing Heal the World, there is bound to happen something. I found this very touching, this story. Yeah. I think this is one of, like, this like I said, I just can repeat myself. These stories need to go out. And then, like reading this story at the very end of the book, who Paul didn't put in the actual book because he could not verify it from that girl, like with the cancer. And then she believes that because being in Neverland and meeting Michael and having contact with Michael, the cancer was gone. You can take it as you want, yeah. But there's in the whole, if you're back in history, there have always been these things, and maybe the one or other was in. There is in France. There is a place. It's called Lourdes, you know. So there, like miracles are supposed to happen there, and you can see there are lots of like limbs and arms and whatever, and people would bring their illnesses there, and they believe they're healed. Now, a lot happens in the head, yeah. But if he had this power to do that, yeah, and she believes she can feel her arm now, or they believe, so let it be. I mean, and it's all like it's like scientific proof now with the placebo effect. You know, people get a pill, they have this effect, and people get another pill, and this pill has no effect at all, and they still believe they feel better. So, yeah. And then my thoughts went to, well, it just happens always in history that people having these special gifts, if it is the special gift of art, of painting, of music, they've always been poor and have not been recognized. Be it Mozart, yeah, be it Van Gogh or whatever, they always lived the pits of life, yeah. And Michael, yes, he had money, but for himself, I think they gave him an awful life, or life gave him an awful life, yeah, despite the person he was, you know. So maybe, and this is my hope, something like this happens to him too. And again, I feed on what Paul said, yeah. The future will show. The future will show what comes out of Michael Jackson. And I really hope it'll work out like this. We are not going to know it. Maybe our children will not know it. But our children's children, what they think. We should work on this. Again, I said it already. Yeah. And then my thoughts went, and in Catholic belief, like all this Lourdes, it's also a Catholic site, yeah. I don't know, in other religions, it's probably the same. We have these saints, you know? And to be a saint, you're never a saint in your lifetime, and it always took 200 or 300 times, and then look at this person's life in Rehines or whatever, and these saints always need to perform miracles. And if you look at back in like Middle Ages or whatever, they would burn the people who are now declared saints. Michael got burned by the press. So it will be on future generations to decide if he is a saint or not. Thank you, Paul. You gave me these thoughts.
Well said.
I mean, I don't feel like we've covered enough of these stories, similar to Christine's, where he really did almost seem to kind of physically heal people. I mean, you've got Leslie Robinette, who she was suffering with leukemia and had a bone marrow transplant. She was given 10 years, but Michael visited the hospital, spoke with her, reunited with her years later, and she's still alive at the time of writing. And I mean, this was in like the 70s or 80s. It's one of the very first stories in the book. So yeah, this was 1973. She was 6, and she's, as far as we know at the moment, she's still going. So what an amazing story that is. Then you've got Leroy Robinson Jr., given weeks to live due to a brain tumour, but whose health improved dramatically, and who lived for another 2 years after meeting Michael and staying in regular contact. Tiffany Rowe, who I mentioned earlier, she was given 3 to 6 months to live. As I said, she's still alive to this day. She's working for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. She was doing the interview for the Humanitarian documentary. And it really is just story after story after story, similar to Christine's, where Michael almost seemed to kind of, I mean, in some cases he wasn't able to permanently heal them, but even if he just was able to give them a better quality of life or extend their life by weeks or months or a couple of years, he really did have this huge impact on people's physical health, which I'm not sure how you want to explain that, but it's pretty special. For my story, I chose, this is on page 102 of the revised version. So it's this page here. Sorry, Paul, I hope you don't mind. I've completely ruined your book with highlighters and annotations and stuff. It's just full of notes. So you definitely see that as a compliment. But this is a story from when Michael visited the Red Cross Children's Hospital in Cape Town. And I'm going to read you the section that I've highlighted. It says, as they walked along a corridor between the bedrooms, Michael spotted a separate room with a child in it. He asked the doctors why the child was alone and what the room was. Doctors told him it was a quarantine room where only limited staff could enter because the child was seriously ill and they did not know what he had or if the boy's illness was contagious. And I'm going to pause there because I think that one of the reasons that this really stuck with me is because of the current pandemic that a lot of the world is in. And so this is a story that I can not relate to, but we all really are at a kind of heightened sense of risk and danger at the moment. And I think we've probably all experienced those situations where you even walk past someone in the street and they're kind of giving you a bad look, like, how dare you walk past me, you know, and there's just lots of animosity at the moment with this kind of unknown illness that's going around. So it said the doctors continued on their way, but Michael stayed behind. And when they advanced a little, he slipped into the room. The doctors and nurses panicked, but none of them wanted to follow Michael into the unprotected room. They were looking through the window while Michael sat on the bed with the child, spoke to him and kissed him on the forehead. Then Michael calmly left the room. And then later on, there's another quote from the same story that I highlighted where Michael said, "I wanted to do what the mother of the child would have done if she had been there." And again, that's something that's not done for show. No one was there. Even the doctors wouldn't go in the room. That's something that he has just taken from within. That was his instinct, his empathy and his instinct that made him go into that room when no one else would go in there, not even the doctors, and just look after that child, go and see that child, make sure they're okay. And, you know, you just can't argue with this, that kind of example. You can't argue with it. There's no other explanation for it other than he was just the most beautiful soul. So I just really loved that story. And Paul's commented to say that was one of his favourites too. Digger J said the same thing, and Sherry. So yeah, it's an amazing story. And I think, like I said, because of the current climate that we're in, health-wise with the pandemic, I think it's particularly relevant and something that can kind of really resonate with a lot of us. So Paul, I mean, what more is there to say really, other than just a huge thank you for creating an amazing book. If you haven't got the book, you must get it. If you're really super nice to Paul, like I was, you might even get a little signed copy. I've seen various people who have asked him to give them a signed copy, which he has been more than willing to do. So if that is something that you're interested in, then feel free to drop him a message. But it really is just an amazing book, such an important one for Michael's legacy, as Taj obviously believes as well. If you haven't seen the documentary, definitely do so. I don't think all of the stories are mentioned, but a lot of them are. And the reason why not all of them are mentioned is because, you know, each story kind of takes a bit more time to tell, because you have the addition of the video footage and stuff to go with it, which is really amazing. You can get to see Michael actually, you know, doing the work, giving speeches. You can get to see the reactions of the children. I'm sure you'll shed a tear or two like we all did while we were watching, but it's a must watch. And of course, you also have Paul's author interview, which I know that we've referenced a couple of times this evening, but that is on the Facebook, the MJBC Facebook page, and also on our YouTube channel as well. So yeah, Paul, thank you, and thank you for joining us as well this evening and interacting. I think, I mean, I know that we've really enjoyed having your input, but I think that the viewers have as well.
Emma, just quickly to add to that, to anybody, he also has a Facebook page and a Twitter feed as well. So they're always good ones to look at and to repost and retweet.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you to Paul for this brilliant book. It is a very good start, but I can see it only as a start. So I really hope, Paul, you get joint forces with Tom Mesereau, and you can like verify all these stories which you could not verify alone. Maybe he has another handle on that, and to get this in a broader scale and in a bigger publicity as you yourself at a single project you can do. I cross my fingers.
Yeah.
That this will continue. I think this is a very, very good way to do that.
It's incredibly important for his legacy.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Paul.
Another really lovely comment's just come in. I will put it up on the screen, but someone put in buy a book for a stranger, and they said that this was the book that they actually bought for them, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, out of all the books in the world to choose from, you know, what a book. So Paul, hopefully that's put a smile on your face, because again, I think that's full credit to you that someone feels so strongly about your book that they're willing to choose yours over all the books out there that could have been chosen. So that is fantastic. I'd just like to say one more quote from the book just to end, because I think, again, this really summarizes not only kind of what the context of the book, but all of the work and efforts that Michael did. And it's on page 80 of the revised version, and it's when Michael is receiving the Harry Chapin Humanitarian Award, and the president of the association said, "From causes like We Are the World to TJ Martell and AIDS awareness, your participation virtually guarantees success for projects which will help relieve hunger, eradicate disease, and improve the environment, as well as celebrate the diversity of life on our planet." And I think to see all of those different areas that he covered, you know, it wasn't just all put into, as we said before, one particular charity, one particular area. It was just whatever needed fixing, I'm going to fix it. And I really liked the word guarantees, because it did, you know, the lengths that he went to, not just all the money, but, you know, the thousands of children that he immunized, the $650,000 worth of gifts, you know, that he personally chose, you know, all of those efforts that he made. I really do feel that he did help to heal the world, and I think that his mission that he believed he was here for, I think that he did accomplish it. And yes, there are still lots of, you know, issues that we have today. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to completely eradicate all of the world's problems, but we've seen enough examples in the conversations we've had this evening from individuals, from facilities, from cities who actually hugely benefited from him and whose lives he did change. And so if that's the legacy that he's left, then I think he's done a pretty good job. So to go on to next month's book, so kind of a very different take. We're kind of going from very objective to more of kind of like a biography and a little bit more of a subjective look on Michael, but we've decided to go for this one here, The Man in Our Mirror. Now, I always wondered how to say her name, but I'm really pleased that in the book she actually says how it should be pronounced, or how her family pronounce it. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, she would pronounce it as Lisa Breezy. So it's supposed to have the French kind of twang, but I think her family say Breezy. So by Lisa Breezy. So if you haven't got this already, I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, really thoroughly enjoying it. Not what I expected at all. Lisa's been really great, as well as her mum as well, with kind of engaging in the group again with us when we have started to discuss this. So I will post some of the comments that kind of she's made about the book. She wrote almost a little bit of a prelude that I think she would appreciate us taking note of before we go into the journey of the book, just so that we know exactly what the context is and what her goal was with the book. So I'll confirm the date with that. It will be mid-March at some point, but I will confirm the date with that. So yeah, if you haven't got your copy, get your copy. Hopefully you've got enough time to get that. But again, ladies, thank you for a really fascinating discussion. Paul, again, thanks to you for all your amazing work, and really good luck with whatever future projects you have, and just keep fighting for Michael. Is there anything you ladies would like to add before we close?
No, just thank you, and yep, another thank you to Paul. It's definitely one of the best books out there for really showing who Michael really is, as it says, the real Michael Jackson really is.
Okay, thank you guys. We're going to sign off here. So we look forward to seeing you again next month. Take care.
Bye.